I'm joined by a good friend today, Belinda Cook. Belinda, thank you so much for being a part of Grief Refuge.
Thank you.
You and I have it's special. We've got a connection, we've got a friendship. We share a lot of similar values in this strange and painful and sometimes helpful space called grief support. Gosh, when I say like the phrase, you help people that are grieving, how does that, how do you define that for the way you show up?
Mm, I help people that are grieving. I do. I mean, you said it there. I just show up.
Hmm.
I mean, literally, that's when people ask me, like, what do I say? What do I do? I'm like, you don't do anything. You don't say anything. You just show up. Bring the coffee, um, you know, and just sit with them. And so, yeah, I kind of feel like that's what my life revolves around is coffee and sitting. And so for me, that's what it means to help and what it means to be with people in grief.
Yeah, cool. Wow, you just got right to the heart of the matter. Thank you.
What that's something I love about grief people too. People that I say grief people, but people that are in their mourning process is they don't small talk doesn't matter to them. If that's something they have taught me, I have learned so much from my companions. Is small talk just doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah,
And yeah.
you mentioned some things, some terminology, mourning and companions. And for our listeners, can you help us understand the difference between mourning and grieving?
Yeah. Essentially, so we studied under the same person a lot, Dr. Alan Wolfelt, and I kind of bring it a little bit simpler. I'm like, grief is what happens to you, and mourning is what you do with it, right? So all the painful, all the stuff that happens to us is that grief, and which is why it stays with us. And then mourning is what we do with that, like what we choose to do. Do we choose to share it with other people?
And in your experience, have you seen a great variation of what people do with the grief that happens to them?
Yeah. So I think some of my favorite people to work with and to support are people that will call me and say that I'm stuck or it's been 20 years. Why does this hurt so much? And it's because I don't really like the word stuck, but I like to use the word pause, right? And so I kind of go, well, you put the pause button on your grief work and you've never unpaused it. And now you have. And so now you're pretty much starting from the beginning, which is why one of my least favorite phrases is everything gets better with time. And I'm like, no, everything doesn't get better at time. Um, it's what you do with that time that matters. And so, yeah.
A lot of people that are grieving just don't have a lot of energy. And so when I hear you say do that with that time, I have like a little internal reaction, not at you, Belinda, but more of like the concept of it, where it's like, wait a minute, I'm grieving, I'm exhausted, and now I'm being coached or advised, counseled, whatever the right term is, to do something. And I'm like, like I can barely like handle it. I can, I'm having a hard time keeping it together. And so
Mhm.
I've pondered that one a lot, Belinda, and I wonder if you have, as far as like that energy aspect, like if people are super exhausted as they grieve and seek something that is going to help them change and help them, I guess, feel better, like where do they find energy when they don't really have any?
Yeah. No, I love that question because many times I love being able to just kind of like, and it sounds odd to say this, give permission because people Just sometimes that's what they need is permission to just do it the way they want to do it. And I'll let them off the hook and I'll say, the only thing you have to do right now, especially in that early process, is survive. That's all I need. That's all I want from you. That's all the world needs from you right now is we need you to survive. And we'll get to the other stuff later, right? And if you can just get up. I have this one woman, I'm like, did you get up and go pee today? And she's like, yes. And I'm like, yay, we did something. Right? And I'm like, did you get back in the bed? She's like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, but you got up and you got out, right? And you got back in the bed. That's okay. You survived. And so I think when people say, what do I do? I'm like, right now, just survive. As you start to get more energy, as you start to feel a little bit more, just even feel more. And that may be the anger, that may be the sadness, those kind of things. But when they come out of the kind of like zombie stage of survival, then we can start talking about little things to add in to the healing process.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. I know it's not an easy question to answer, and I know that there probably isn't one right answer. It's
Yeah.
just more of like kind of a reflection. And I also am thinking as far as like when people got caught up on the stuckness too. And
Yeah.
so I'm like, we both know that grief isn't a linear process. It's not something that, step one happens and now your next step is step two. But at the same time, it just was my mind wandered off in this direction where it's like, hey, people, it's really common for people to like think that they're in a place of like regressing, or I don't even know if that's a word, but regression, and they're going backwards and they're like, like again, like it almost angers them. I've heard a lot of people speak to feeling really angry. And have you reflected on like as far as grief journeys or a grief process, like do you think people are almost like setting themselves up for like more pain or more punishment in that thinking process of I'm stuck or I'm regressing in my grief?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You just brought to mind one of the beautiful ladies that I'm working with right now. And she's very logical. She's a very logical person. And she came in and she's like, I was doing so good. And I hear this a lot, right? I was doing so good. What in the world happened? I was doing so well. And for the last 3 days, I have done nothing but wail and cry and just, I'm going backwards. She literally used the word, I'm regressing. I thought I was moving forward. I thought I was doing well. And I'm just doing so bad. And, and I just kind of smile a little bit. And they're like, what is going on? And I'm like, no, you're on the right path. Like, this is so very natural. Like, this is needed. What you're experiencing is so natural. And so I have the honor of like taking that shame away from it. Because people do feel shame about that, right? Like they feel so shameful that they're in pain. And that's what angers me and what gets my heart rate up, right? Is like there's so much shame around it. And so the first thing we do is we take the words good and bad away, right? We don't I really don't care for those words anyways. And of course you can tell I use the word natural a lot. I mean, because normal, you've heard me say this joke before. My joke is that normal is only a setting on a dryer, right? Like no one knows what normal is. And so I like to use the word natural. And so giving them a validation of what they're experiencing is actually right on track, especially with people that need that. Am I doing this right? Am I doing this, in that space? Just validating them. Yeah.
Have you ever met a grieving person who didn't shame themselves?
Hmm. Hmm. Let me think. No.
Yeah, I haven't either. I
Mm-mm.
don't
I haven't
know.
either. Yeah, I did some. You may have heard me talk about him before, but Dr. Kurt Thompson. That's where I learned a lot of how to do a lot of my shame work, and it was super helpful with me. And it's not only for myself healing wise, but also to who I work with and who I spend time with. But yeah, no, I really don't. This is a great question because as I reflect on it, no, I don't think I've ever not had someone feel shame. And I love talking to them a difference between guilt and shame. And so, because many people do feel that guilt of this and that, but many of them just feel shameful, especially when it's like that time thing again, right? I
Mhm.
mean, it's so ridiculous. And so breaking that timetable, that breaks a lot of the shame.
Yeah, the shame, unfortunately, somehow in our human makeup, it seems to be part of the experience. There
Hmm.
gets a point, and maybe it is tied to time. I don't know. I haven't really figured it out, but I've
Yeah.
thought a lot about it, and I'm like, it's the shame piece. This sounds judgy, and I don't mean it that way, but I often think it's unnecessary. But the
Mm.
unnecessariness is necessary because it is really happening. So it's there. It needs to be addressed. And
Yeah.
yeah, I I'm gonna actually take a step back because I'm like, I know what you do. We've been friends for a while, but you've shared some great examples of supporting people. Tell us about what you do.
I love that question. What do you do? And I always say it's according to what day it is, right? Because I wear many hats. Um, and I know that you kind of tease me about that sometimes. I have a lot of sticks in the fire, but my main thing I do is support people in their grief. So I am a licensed counselor. That took the long way around to get there, and that was one hell of a journey. I some days I'm just a motorcyclist. Some days I'm the crazy woman that visits Bucky's. Some days I'm a mom, and but my main thing that I do is I have the honor of being able to support people. I love support groups. I specialize in that. I think that is something. The group work is so powerful. Finding other people that shows that you're not alone. And yeah, and that's what I do. I love to create beauty, seek beauty in the pain, in the sorrow, and then I'm a constant on the growth kind of person. Like I'm always wanting to grow, and yeah, so that's what I do. That's kind of the few things.
I hear a lot of things of like this or that, and for example, like from grief to growth. And I'd love to pick your brain a bit about that as far as like the perspective you have on because growth we'll call it personal growth. It sounds like it has value to you. It sounds like it's important, and I'm wondering if that is, for lack of a better word, an objective in some of the group work that you do. And so, like, is do people come to your groups, that are grieving and say, like, I really want to grow from this? Or is this something that is co-created in the dynamic of the group? And so I really want to open up these floodgates and,
Yeah,
this topic of like grief and growth and hear your thoughts on it.
yeah, no, I love that. So I'm going to say yes, no, maybe. Yeah, which is one of my favorite answers to many questions. The thing I love about groups is there's so many different personalities, but that also scares many people when they do, especially grief group, right? We have some that come in and they want the curriculum. They want to know, what are we going to read? What are we doing? I want to get through this pain. I want to get through this. And then we have some that come in and we may hand them the book and they may just be like, nah, I just need to sit. And I'm like, okay, that's awesome too. We'll do that. And so I think personalities make such a big difference in that space. So I'm going to go backwards a little bit and remind me of the question because I just got all excited about it. We talk about growth and, people wanting to grow. Sometimes people do come in with the expectation that they're going to grow. But many times people do come in and just say, I have nowhere else to go. I have nowhere else. I've exhausted the times I can tell my story. And so that's where my role comes in, is because I can see from the moment. It is a gift. It is a gift that it's taken a while to craft this gift. But even though it's a natural thing, like when I hear someone's story, I can see the hope that they can't see. I see their healing. And now the hard part about that is waiting till they see it and being there with them, in that process, maybe nudging a little bit, but never push. So many times people just come in and they just are lonely. They're, like you said before, they're exhausted and they need a space of rest. That's why I love Grief Refuge, right? It's because they need a place of rest. In that process, though, I don't think I've never not had one person leave a group not moving forward, at least some, or not grown in that process. And so they may come in, some people want to come in with that, need, desire. Many people don't even know if they can. And so, but I'm going to say everyone that I've had the opportunity to spend time with in a group setting has left that group at least a little bit further in their self growth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Is it fair to say that many people, so you spoke to the personalities, and thank you for speaking to that. And that's, in my opinion, what I think is the hardest part about groups
Yeah.
is accommodating all of the
Mm-hmm.
varieties of personalities of the people that make up that groups. And
Yeah.
that I stopped facilitating groups online because I could tell, having experience of working in groups in person and then in the
Mm-hmm.
online version, I was like, it it has its value, but for me it didn't measure up to what I was comparing to in the in-person group experience. And those personalities online, it became what I thought. It became more of not one dimensional, but kind of like an either or, where it was like
Mm-hmm.
one or two people dominating the conversation and
Mm-hmm.
the rest just listening. And I think that's a challenge in group dynamics that a facilitator needs to be aware of and have the skills to help balance the scales, I guess. But
Yeah.
I got really detracted from where I wanted to go, and that was insane. Like, in leading groups, and specifically for like grieving and support, do you see a lot of change from group members where they say, hey, I want to see myself grow this way, or some version of that, to how they actually end up experiencing some of their growth when they reflect on the hindsight piece? It's a complicated question. Do you want me to rephrase
It
it?
is. Yeah, let's dig a little deeper. So, okay, are you thinking like, did someone come in with a goal of this is what I want it to look like when I leave here? But in that process, something completely different happens and they're completely surprised or maybe even disappointed that they didn't hit a goal, which, by the way, once again, has never happened. Um, and um, so, is that kind of what you were thinking?
It is what I'm thinking. Yeah, I love the word of using a goal. So somebody coming in to a support group who is grieving and saying, "Hey," whether they say it out loud or they just think it to themselves, it doesn't matter. But they have their goal, and then through the process, is are your groups generally 8 weeks, or do you know how long your
Um,
groups are?
yes, no, maybe. Um,
True. Yeah,
yeah,
well
yeah.
said.
Yeah. So in my new role, there are open groups and closed-ended groups. When I create them, I have both open and closed also. So for those people that don't know, so open groups are anyone can come. Yeah, they're ongoing. Many times it's twice a month kind of thing. And then there's the closed-ended ones, which are 8 to 10. I always go 10 weeks. I found that 8 is too short, 12 is too long, 10 is that perfect number. Because especially the first one, it's really just kind of testing the waters, right? Like, do they even want to be here? And that last one is that reflection. We call it kind of the fellowship space of it. And so, really, the work is done in the 8 weeks. If there's, whatever's done for that person, because each person, something different happens. And so the kind of that working stage is in that 8 weeks. And my goal, though, is to make it not feel like work, right? I mean, that's part of, like I said, once again, I have some people that love the homework. They love doing homework. And some, I know they're going to toss that book up in the back corner with their Bible in the car and they're not going to pick it up till next week. And that's okay. All right. So yeah, I do.
Okay, so they have a goal. It sounds like in a 10-week span. The question was more related to, do they recognize that they've grown in different ways than what that goal was originally stated?
Yeah. Yeah, they'll do that. And that's what that last beautiful night is about. Is the reflection night of it is our day, whatever day we're doing it, is they're able to look back and see where things had shifted. And they may say that, I had this goal to be here, be able to do this, be able to do that. And yes, I may have reached that goal, but other things have also happened. Which is one reason why I prefer support style. I like having a guide along the way. Like I do like that because that definitely the adult learning style, right? We always want to have something to read and for them to put their hands on. For my kinesthetic people, they need that space. My reading writers, then the support people for my feelings. So I prefer a support style with a guideline of curriculum. I don't like that word, but I do use that word. And so,
Since we're on the topic of groups, what do you think as a facilitator in grief support? What do you think has been like your most important lesson from any group member or any group total?
like, what is my favorite thing that I've learned from them on how to become a good facilitator?
As a facilitator, what has been your most important lesson you've learned about supporting people in grief?
Connecting stories. Oh, that is my favorite thing. I know we're on audio, but you can see me on video, and you can probably see how I just like completely lit up when I said that. But connecting stories is that is one of my favorite things to do. I feel like a pirate sometimes, right? Like I'm walking around people and they're dropping these jewels, and I'm picking them up, put them in my pocket, and then I get to pick it up and I take it in my pocket and I hand it to somebody else, and I'll say, "Hey, George, when so and so said this, I saw you have a physical reaction to that. Tell me, what was that?" Right? And even something is, and it really connecting the stories makes them more connected in themselves. Because that first night, you're sitting in a room with 8 different strangers. All you know is that everyone has experienced some kind of death, right? And usually it's like a topic kind of death, a specific kind. And so as we check in, as we get to know each other, I have the opportunity to connect their lives. And that helps them be connected to someone else. And so,
I
yeah, so just connecting that.
I appreciate you saying that. It makes me think of some groups are labeled, for lack of a better
Mm-hmm.
term, like for example, a spousal loss support group. And so there's an assumption there where if you and I lost a spouse and we're a member of this group, we now have something in common. And with that, that there's it I've thought of it as like kind of the superficial connection. But now when you get into somebody's actual story, you recognize that uniqueness. You recognize like, oh, okay, like maybe it's not the same. And it helps me, like if you're reflecting on your story, it helps me better connect with my own story. And what a gift you bring, Belinda, to helping people connect each other's stories.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound like easy work.
It is easy now. It takes a lot of practice. And so anytime I'm teaching facilitation skills, I that's why, so we hear the words active listening and these kind of things. I like to call it reflective listening. And so, especially when I'm teaching and I'm kind of guiding people, mentoring them on facilitation skills, like you really got to put the hard work in those first 2 or 3 weeks. And if you will put that hard work in of listening to someone's story, deeply listening, like even using the phrase, what I hear you saying is, right? Now tell me more. If you will do that for at least the first 3 weeks, it's such an easy thing after that. Then the group essentially runs itself. And so, because now you have modeled what you want from them. So it takes work to do it. But once you start seeing it, it becomes very natural and it becomes a very easy flow. And I mean, I do it in my everyday life now. Right, like 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, I think is some days of my life. Like I'm like, oh my goodness, you know what? I have this absolutely perfect person you need to meet. Right, when someone tells me their story, I love connecting people to other people.
Mhm.
And there's been so many times in just in the time that we've known each other that my life had like the many people in my life have like connected and it's so interesting, especially when it's my grief people, my motorcycle people, um, and just everyday life people. When I can figure out that they know each other or how their stories are connected, or even connecting them themselves, it's such a powerful thing.
Nice. I hear the words isolated and lonely and alone a lot. And so
Mm.
in the grief space, that's it sounds like it's very helpful to be able to connect people to one another. And that actually ties into the early on when we started the conversation, one of the words you spoke to is the word companion. And
Mm.
so, how does companionship tie in into some of these connecting stories and connecting people because of the stories that they've shared for you?
Yeah. Yeah. So I love that the model of that companion model because many times I only have to be their companion for a short while if I can facilitate other companionships, right? So that's my goal. If anything's a goal of mine is to create a safe space where people can connect together and then they create their own space. Right? Like I love when I hear, the four of us went out to dinner last weekend and we actually laughed for the first time. And these are four people that didn't even know each other 2 months ago. But because their commonality of losing their husband or their wives or a child or, a mother or a father, because of their commonality, now they've created this system. And so, companionship. So many times I just get to be their companion for a little while until I can connect them with their other people. Because the other people in their lives they just aren't able. And it's not their fault. They're just not able because they're grieving their own way of that person. And so that is one of the beauties of grief, right? Like that's one of the things that when I hear people say, you see me say that a lot. I find beauty. I found in pain is that it brings new people into our lives and people that we never ever would have imagined. I mean, you and I, we have same vibes, but we're very different people. But because of our love for helping people, and our grief in general, right? Like similar stories, it connects us.
Do you think all grieving people need companionship?
Mm, yes, no, maybe. I'm going to say at some point in their walk, yes. I'm going to say at some point. At some point, we need isolation. I know I do. I need to be able to say, okay, today, I just need to do nothing but sit and watch ridiculous TV on Netflix and just do nothing and sit in my pain and sit in my sorrow and just feel sorry for myself and like embrace the temper tantrum. But tomorrow I need you to call and make sure I'm okay. Right. And so I think we need isolation, but I think we're not designed to do life alone. We're not. We're not designed to do any of this alone. Love, grieve, we're just not designed that way.
I agree. Yeah. I think it was pretty wise that she said at some phase too. I think things change a lot, and through that change, there's impermanence, and through that impermanence, sometimes we don't even know what we need. But yeah, I do think at some point that companionship is necessary because I think that the aloneness and the isolation somehow almost becomes like a food or something that people use as fuel to now judge themselves or through their own mind process, like kind of punish themselves a little bit. That judgment of like we spoke to earlier about like I'm stuck or I'm not doing this right or something like that. I think that yeah, I think that with companionship, it really helps us see a lot of perspectives that we normally wouldn't see because all of our minds have filters to them.
Mm.
And now tie into something as complex as grief, it's easy to really judge oneself
Mm.
easily.
Yeah. Oh, man, the way that we judge ourselves when we're just trying to do it and we minimize, right? Judging ourselves on how we're doing minimizes our pain. And the minimalization of our pain. And I tell people, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to minimize anybody's pain. Nobody's pain or sorrow or loss is greater than yours. It's different, but it's not, we're not going to minimize yours at all to this whole process. And so there are times where I do get a little firm. Right? I have to be firm but gentle with my companions, where I'll say, no, we're not going to go that route because that's just not healthy. And it comes down to the shame, minimizing them, shaming themselves for those kind of things, judging themselves for what they're doing. And so I think, like I said, there's a lot of validation, but it's also not allowing them to sit in that minimization, the judgment the whole time. Challenging them. I love, love, love to challenge people on things. Yeah.
Taking a huge pivot in our conversation too, because I'm backtracking, and I got to ask Belinda, how did you say yes? Like, what was your saying yes point to saying like, I know you want to help people, but like, where was the yes when you said I want to help people throughout their grief journey?
Mm. Well, I mean, and you've heard me say, so I've said this before to you. Like, I was born into this and married into it. I've experienced it myself. And I tried my damnedest to run away from being in grief work. Like, I did everything I can, but I was prepared for it also along the way. And really, honestly, I think, and it's such a beautiful circle story. And I thank you so much for allowing me to answer this question. Because in 2016, I had two different internships. And I was in my master's program. One was I was at UAB Palliative Care, and I had three different ones, but the two most important ones. One I was in UAB Palliative Care, and the other one was at Community Grief Support. That's where my love of groups came about in there. And then I had another one that I was with the University of Alabama for like one semester. Absolutely hated it. Realized I'm not an office person. I can't do office counseling. Hated that. I became more energetic. I realized that there was this glow and this joy about me when I would sit with people that were in loss, that were grieving, that were mourning their people. And so I went in, got the internship at Community Grief Support, and my intern supervisor, Steve Sweat, handed me a book. And it said, Understanding Your Grief. And I was like, oh my God, not another book. I've been reading books for 2.5 years. I'm so done. I'm ready for this to be done. This is what we do. And I'm like, okay, fine, I'll read it. And I started reading that book. And I was like, oh, hell, where has this book been? Like, where was it whenever I experienced like what I was going through? And so, yeah, so I started kind of absorbing that, embracing that companion style, embracing my own pain, realizing how much work I still had to do and myself. And so I guess that's when I said yes to this, is when I started doing my own stuff and realizing that I really do want to be around people. I want to be around the sad people. I want to be around the pissed off people. I want to be around that. And it's kind of a selfish thing because I want to see when that shift is made. No matter how long it takes. Patience, oh my Lord, patience is a virtue is like, I think someone that works in grief actually came up with that probably, right? Like, because to be patient with someone, to not be like, oh gosh, come on, you can do this. I know you can, right? And to just be like, no, their pace, go at their pace, go at their pace, Belinda. There's so much joy in it. And so, yeah, I think on a selfish level of it, being part of the shift and getting to see the tiny shifts, that goes back to connecting and listening to the story. And then just watching that, sitting in that, ah, it's so spectacular. It's so gorgeous. It really is.
Great. There's a lot of meaning there for you, and thank you for articulating that. The shift that you speak of and seeing that and the beauty and the grace and everything involved in it, it makes me wonder. I'd love your opinion on this. Do you think grief ever stops?
Ooh. Oh, let's see. Well, if we go backwards and we say what we define grief as, is what happens to you, right? And mourning is what you do with it. I'm going to say yes, no, maybe again, but I'm going to say more likely no, but it becomes sweeter. It, it goes from bitter to sweet, right? I think it becomes softer. And I think those are the words that I like to use. Grief is hard. What happens to us is hard. It can become softer. So when people say, when does this get easier? I'm like, oh, that's not the word. Let's reframe it just a little bit. And so what would it look like if we said, what does it look like when it gets softer? And I think that's a good thing that grief doesn't stop because it's a great reminder of life. And because if we forgot how it felt, right, it would be meaningless. So I think our bodies tell us, right? Our bodies remind us. I love that this is the week that we're talking, because this week is the week that it's been. I have to think about how long Mark and I have been together. It's been 28 years since his mom died, and it's been 30 years since his dad died. And it's in this very similar, in the same November, kind of just sucks for him, right? But even this many years later, I can see him getting agitated. I can see him start getting sadder. And it's his body. Until it brings into his awareness. And so just being patient with that. That was a great rabbit hole. Thank you for letting us go down that.
Most welcome. And thanks for speaking to it because a lot of times American culture, it's a simple goal when grieving, and that goal is to just want to feel better. Some people will say, I want to be over it. And so it's good to hear your perspective and it's good to hear your reflections on whether or not grief ends. I like the bittersweet analogy. That's fun. I might borrow that one from you.
Go
And
for it.
thank you. So, hey, we've talked about groups. We've gotten to know you a little bit more. And there's one other piece I really wanted to focus on today because you had shared to me that you want to create things to help people in the grief space. And the groups are a tremendous creation, but I also know that you've created and are creating other things. And so I'd love to talk a little bit more about a journal that you created, and it's called Becoming a Mindful Mourner. Unless you changed the title. You didn't change the title, did you?
No, 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 I
Okay,
didn't.
good.
No, no. Yeah, you helped me work really well hard on that one. Yeah,
So
yeah.
you wrote and you published a journal, and I did have the opportunity to review it, and there were a few things that really stood out for me about this journal in that it really addresses a lot of different learning styles. And so I'd love to hear you speak a little bit about your journey of authoring your first writing piece called Becoming a Mindful Mourner.
Yeah. Oh man. So I used to call it my procrastination tool, right? So like when I had something that I was supposed to be doing, I'd pull it out and I'd work on it a little bit. It took me about 3 years, I guess. Started when I was back, well, I guess in 2019. And I've said this to you before, and I've said this to other people. Like, if I would have put it out whenever I first started, it would have been total. It's okay to cuss on this show, right? Like, it's okay. Like, it would be total shit. It just wasn't because I didn't know then what I know now, and I had to go through all of that pain and sorrow and growth and knowledge to create this. But it was a fun procrastination thing to pull out, write a little bit more on it, watch it shift, write a little bit more, watch it shift as I shifted. And then I just was like, I got to get this out. I got to get this out. I've worked on it long enough. And the fear of the technical part of it is what kept me from really finishing it. And so, yeah, I essentially created an ADHD grief gratitude journal. And someone said to me recently, said, Belinda, you have written a book that is designed not to finish. And I'm like, oh, I did. That's awesome. Because I give permission at the beginning. Like, you probably won't finish this. You won't, and that's okay. And so I did shift it around a little bit of editing on it, because there are some important things in there that I did create that I wanted people to get that was in the back of the book. So I moved to the front of the book. But yeah, that's what I wanted to create.
An ADHD grief gratitude journal?
That's essentially what I call it. That's what it is. It's designed for people like myself. Yeah, I share a little bit in the beginning. I tell a little bit of my story on where when I was in that space of just self doubt, self hatred, shame. I tried all these different things that were supposed to make me feel better. Right, coloring books, Bible studies, gratitude journals, all these things. And then I look around and there's these half finished things because I just can't finish them. I just, I mean, and so that caused more shame on me, right? Like that created more. When I'm going through I call them my doom boxes, my ADHD doom boxes. My fellow ADHD people will know what those are. I will find old journals that I started writing and then I would just stop. All of a sudden, it would just stop. And, calendars, those kind of things. Through my walk, though, and through my healing and through my journey, I realized that I don't have to finish those things because I used them when I did. So now I'm okay with not finishing a coloring page when I'm doing something, if I'm using it at training or if I'm coloring or whatever. I don't have to finish the page because I used it for what I needed it for at that moment. And I gave myself grace for that. But yeah, and you talked about I created something for different kinds of people. And so there's things to do, right? Challenges in there of how to grow that gratitude mindset. Then there's the journaling aspect of it. And then there is the mindfulness, meditation aspect of learning to be self compassionate and self love. And so, of course, my hope is that people will make it go all the way through if they want, if they need, but there's no time limit to it. And I think that was a goal of mine. And I know I brought that to you. One of the first thing I said to you was that there aren't any days on it because that just lays shame on people. So you can put in a date. There's a space for a date, but there's no Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, day one, whatever. I do encourage it to go through because it does build on each other. So whenever they put it down and they pick it back up, just start where they are. So yeah, that's how it's designed.
It's super great. I love the uniqueness to it, and I love the way that it's, well, your intentions were clearly stated in the creation of it. And so I think, even if, because I've seen it and I've read through it a few times, I don't think, I don't identify with having ADHD myself. And yet I still think this journal would be helpful to me as I grieve and as I look to heal. So I just want to clarify that too, although that,
Yeah.
it's available to someone who would label themselves as ADHD. It doesn't have to, you don't have to be put yourself into that box in order to have,
Yeah, no, it's created for so many different kinds of people. And I thought about that. And when we talk about connecting earlier, connecting people. That's how I was able to finish it, was people like you that are different than me, are different personalities, people from our very slow reading book club, all the different personalities in there. You can see each of them in this. The people that's what I said. If I would have created it in 2019, it would have just been me. And it wouldn't have been anything. I don't think it would have been. But because of the people that I have met and the people I have collected and put in my pocket, right? My jewels of people, that's where this came from, is you guys, my people, my companions that walked me through some really, really shitty times the last few years. And you guys helped make this happen and encouraged me along the way, gave me my, weekly, hey, let's sit down and read moments. That's right. Let's do this. Um, and so, yeah, so this is created for people of all kinds, of everyone.
Yeah, you've also helped me answer my earlier question about our companions needed in grief. And I think you've solidified the answer to that as a solid yes.
Yeah.
Because I think that we help each other in creating more. And I don't know, what's the purpose of life? My filter says part of that answer is creating. And so, yeah, that's pretty neat. I think you dropped an Easter egg too of that you are creating something additional. Are you working on something else?
I am. I am. I'm doing a second one. And it was funny. That was one reason why I knew I had to get this one out, is because I had essentially started working on the second book in my head. And it was, unless I got this book out, then out of my mind space, the other one wouldn't have been able to come into focus. And I've been kind of struggling a little bit. Like I knew where I wanted to go with it. And it's got a lot to do with that S word, shame. It has a lot to do with the S words in general of grief. Much like anything else in my life, if I want to learn to do it, I usually create a space where I have to have a deadline. And so I started creating the book itself, but I just couldn't. There was like this block of like, I was like, gosh, this just seems so negative. And I know grief and negative, what? But I just couldn't put my finger on where the block was. And so I signed up, did a proposal, got accepted the proposal to do a presentation about the subject of language and the language that we use in grief. And then it kind of forced me out of that block, and it gave me the ultimate, S word. And so, yeah, so essentially that's what I'm doing is my next project has to do with helping people learn to reframe the language that we use. Because it's just something as simple as from good to bad, soft and easy, or soft, right? Those kind of things like that. Just a little bit of reframing our language. We can say the same thing that we intended to say and not cause as much pain. And so just that little bit of listening, reframe it. One of my biggest things that taught me that was I do a lot of suicide prevention work. And, we no longer use the words committed suicide. We say they died by suicide, because that's what it is. That person is no longer here. It doesn't matter how they left this world, it's that they're no longer here. And so just shifting that language just a little bit, not shaming people when they still use it, just reframing it for them. So just reframing things like self-care, right? We hear self-care, we roll our eyes in the back of the head, especially as therapists. But if I look at someone and I go, Reed, how are you caring for yourself today? Right? Now
A
I've kind of
different
put a
feeling.
glitch. Yeah. And I've put a glitch in the matrix is what I like to say, right? Like I've taken that auto response and I've made you stop to think And so yeah, so this is the next thing I'm really creating is a how to help people reframe the language of grief and the things that we've been taught to say, taught not to say. It's okay to say some things people are scared to say. Yeah.
Good stuff, Belinda. Wow, that's a great thing. That's something that can be so helpful. So appreciate you speaking that into immortalization of a podcast.
Mhm. Yeah.
And we
Thank
look
you.
forward to when it's available to us.
Yeah.
If one is interested in becoming a mindful mourner, where do they find it?
You can find it on Amazon. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
search for becoming a mindful mourner on
Yep.
Amazon.
Yeah. And again, last name, it's pronounced Cook, but it's spelled the way it is. And I would also suggest go ahead and get you some colored pencils because there is a space in there for us people that like to doodle. A little bit of tell me Easter eggs in there. Would encourage that. Order you a pack of little crayons or colored pencils to go with it. Um, and so yeah, it's
Yeah,
available there.
what I liked about the doodling space is that sometimes reflective questions, they're open-ended questions intentionally, and sometimes we don't know what to write or, we don't have thoughts immediately. So using the doodle space can really help keep someone on the page and also, give themselves permission to have their own patience and their own grace if they're reflecting on one of the questions for whatever's on that page. So again, it was a very clever mastermind from you in putting that journal together, and I'm glad it's now available. I really am. I think that it's a helpful journal, and I highly recommend to you listening to look into it and invest in it because I think it's really going to help you throughout your grief process.
Yeah, and I would encourage. One of my favorite things that I created in there was the gratitude and action cards, which is a thing that I did move to the front. It was in the back and moved to the front. You can go on my website at freetogrieve.com and click on the Becoming a Mindful Mourner resource page, and you can download this and print them and give them out to people. But they're just quick little things about like reframing I'm sorry to thank you. Little things you can do with, once again, speaking to my kinesthetic learners, right? What do I do? What can I do to grow this? And so, yeah.
Awesome. Well, Belinda, it's been a joy. I
Yeah.
love having this wonderful conversation about, professional and personal experience. It's This has been cool and something that I'll take with me as, I face the rest of the day, and I will really want to thank you for your time, thank you for your wisdom, and thank you for your energy.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for being my friend. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and thanks for sharing the wisdom on Grief Refuge.